하나님은 유대인들을 전 세계로 흩어놓으셨지만 그렇다고 해서 하나님은 그들을 잊으신 것이 아니라 언젠가는 다시 그들을 이스라엘로 불러 모으시겠다고 하셨죠. 우리는 그 예언이 성취되는 시대에 살고 있습니다. 왜냐하면 지금 전 세계에 있는 많은 유대인들이 이스라엘로 정말로 돌아오고 있거든요. 이렇게 이스라엘로 유대인들이 돌아오는 것을 히브리어로 알리야라고 하죠. 미국과 유럽뿐만 아니라 최근 들어서는 러시아가 우크라이나를 공격한 이후에 우크라이나에 있는 유대인들도 이스라엘로 많이 돌아오고 있다고 합니다. 정말 놀라운 일이죠. 그렇게 유대인들이 알리야할 수 있도록 그 모든 일들을 주관하고 진행하는 단체가 이스라엘의 주이시 에이전시라고 하는 단체인데요. 주이시 에이전시의 CEO이신 아로노비즈 씨가 이번에 한국에 오셨습니다. 그래서 오늘은 아로노비즈 씨로부터 우크라이나에서 온 유대인들에 대한 이야기를 좀 자세히 나눠보도록 하겠습니다. 어서 오십시오. 반갑습니다.
샬롬.
최근에 우크라이나 다녀오셨다라는 이야기를 들었습니다. 물론 그곳에 있는 유대인들을 만나보기 위해서 가셨겠지만 직접 가서 보니까 지금 그곳의 그 유대인들의 상태가 좀 어떻습니까? 상황이?
I want to take a step back and start on a more ground level. The Jewish Agency for Israel is the largest Jewish organization in the world. And our headquarters are based in Jerusalem, but we work in 66 countries. And the reason for that is that we need to make sure that every Jew who wants to make Israel their home can do that, and we help them, advise them, prepare them, and bring them. But no less important, any Jew which is under risk in some circumstances and needs to be rescued and be brought to Israel, to a safe haven, to our Holy Land, this is our most critical job. And so from time to time, we see areas of instability and crisis, immediately turn our operation in those areas to be one of a rescue. And so the last 11 weeks, since February 24th, this is what we define the area around Ukraine. This is a risk area, a war zone, a rescue area. And so from today to tomorrow, I'm very proud to say that what we did is we settled ourselves around 5 crossing borders in 4 countries surrounding Ukraine. So in Poland, in Hungary, in Moldova, in Romania, as well as in Ukraine. And what we've done is we have set facilities where we're able to accept all of those fleeing out, all of those thousands of refugees, both work to help them evacuate and get out of Ukraine in many, many complex ways, but also lodging them on those facilities on the crossing border countries, providing them first and foremost with the basic equipment and hot meal, hot shower, personal equipment, etc., saving their lives, and then making sure that we're able to prepare them to come to Israel. And so for us, this has been a central part of our work around Ukraine in the last couple of weeks.
예전에 구소련이 무너진 이후에 우크라이나 유대인들이 대규모로 오데사를 통해서 이스라엘로 알리야를 했는데 그때 알리야하지 않고 지금까지 아직도 남아있는 사람들은 도대체 왜 이스라엘로 알리야하지 않았다라고 그렇게 이야기를 합니까?
So yes, you're right. During the 90s, after the falling of the Iron Curtain, we had over 1.2 million Jews coming out of former Soviet Union countries, including Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and other countries surrounding. And yet still, there are hundreds of thousands of Jews who have decided to continue their life in their local communities, but rather live it Jewishly. And I think that's the beauty and the change that since then, since this 30 years have passed, a very flourishing and thriving Jewish life have evolved, both in Ukraine and in Russia. And we believe, we have to be there and help those Jews become strongly connected to their tradition, to their heritage, and to Israel. And we know that over time, many of them will then be more ready to make the decision and come to Israel. And we look at it kind of climbing a ladder from step to step until they feel they're ready enough to make the move.
지난 2월 24일 날 러시아가 우크라이나를 침공한 이후에 우크라이나 사람들도 그렇고 그곳에 살고 있는 유대인들도 그렇고 설마 이렇게 러시아가 침공을 할까라고 생각을 했다가 이런 일이 일어났어요. 그 이후에 이제 그 유대인들이 동시에 아주 굉장히 많은 사람들이 이스라엘로 알리야하고 있는데 이런 상황에서 GC 에이전시의 역할은 뭡니까?
We work very closely with the Israeli embassy and its representatives on the ground. We work very closely with the rabbis, with the local communities and the local leadership in those big Jewish communities. We work closely with the other international organizations, including Christian Friends volunteer organizations, as well as organizations like JDC and Chabad and others. And so I think what was very clear to us for a couple of weeks already before is that we may be facing this kind of a crisis. I think no one imagined the extent of it, the length of it, the devastating consequences of it. But we early on started to plan different scenarios of what this may look like in the western part of Ukraine, in eastern part of Ukraine. You know, one should not underestimate the operational complexity of, such a response. And so our ability to do so is because the Jewish Agency has always been there as a global organization and had this kind of deeper understanding and familiarity with the local communities and the local infrastructure.
이번에 이제 우크라이나 같은 경우는 전쟁이 난 그런 케이스지만 다른 나라에 있는 유대인 공동체가 있는 그런 곳에서 지진이 난다든가 화산 폭발이 일어난다든가 아니면 또 엄청난 자연재해 그래서 도저히 그곳에 있을 수 없는 이런 일이 일어나게 되면은 그 유대인들을 이스라엘로 데리고 오기 위한 어떤 그 이스라엘 정부나 GC 에이전시가 갖고 있는 매뉴얼들이 있습니까?
The global organization that looks to address the biggest challenges that happen in the Jewish world, this is what we do. We bring that expertise to work and respond to any kind of emergency. And I can tell you, my WhatsApp as a leader of this organization has a group for emergencies in North America, and emergencies in Latin America, and emergencies in Israel, and emergencies in Europe. And at any given moment, it could come from a huge fire in the west coast of California to an earthquake in Mexico to, God forbid, an anti-Semitic attack on the ground in Europe. And in any such cases, immediately our team on the ground are reporting to us. We have a situation room. We have a 24/7-hour situation room in Israel, which is receiving calls and emergency asks from all across the world at any given moment, and then we respond. And it depends at different levels. Sometimes responding is, getting the information and linking them to local authorities. Sometimes it's sending people, sometimes it's sending resources, sometimes it's rescuing. And we're doing some very complex and sensitive issues. And so we have special section of our staff, which is, that's its responsibility to be in resilience of communities, emergency, preparedness and responses.
지난 2020년 그리고 2021년 거의 2년 동안 팬데믹으로 인해서 전 세계 모든 나라들이 많이 힘들어했는데 이스라엘로의 알리야가 어떻습니까? 이 코로나 팬데믹 기간에 더 줄어들었습니까? 아니면은 그때하고 똑같이 유지가 됐습니까? 아니면 더 늘어났습니까?
I think in a very natural way, as the pandemic broke and travel was forbidden and it was much more difficult to move, we were actually anticipating a very sharp decrease. And we were very much surprised for two reasons. First, because the demand of people to come actually rose. And so from many countries of the world, we experienced actually a gradual growth of people who want to come from Latin America, from France, from the United States and other countries. So that was the first thing. And the other thing is that we were very proud that the country of Israel has never closed its gates to new olim. So we were able to convince the government that while the gates may have been closed to tourists and pilgrims to come to visit, if you were an ole, if you were someone who made the decision to come to Israel, yes, you had to quarantine, you had to be vaccinated, you may had to comply with several restrictions, but the doors were always open for you. And that's a very critical ethos of ours. The doors of Israel will always be open for Jews who want to come and make Israel their home. And so actually, during 2021, which is still, a full year of COVID, we reached back over 28,000 olim. So we didn't come back yet to the record of 19, but we were growing back very high in a quicker pace than we've anticipated. And we, even before the crisis of Ukraine, we knew 2022 is going to yet grow more over that 28,000. I can tell you that the fact that between January and I would say, beginning of May, in 4.5 months, we've brought over 20,000 just from Russia and Ukraine and that area, along with the others. I'm sure 2022 is going to be yet breaking the record again. And we see a huge rise in the interest. I would say from Russia, we're just seeing the beginning, the tipping of the iceberg. We see a huge rise in the demand. I can tell you that since we opened our hotline, our emergency hotline, which was the first thing that we did as the war broke, since we opened it until today, we had over 100,000 calls of people from Ukraine and Russia in the area. And we had over 37,000 immediate requests for aliyah, which we're taking care of. And so that's even before relating to the continuing increase from France, from Latin America, from the United States. So in general, where I draw optimism from is exactly that. There is a huge interest of Jews to come back to their home, to their homeland. And Ethiopia, which is a very special area in case of ours, where we operate differently based on government decisions, we already know that during 2022 we'll bring over 3,000. And so combining all of that together, there's no doubt that Aliyah is in Aliyah and will continue to be so in 2022 and probably in 2023 and on.
제가 그런 질문을 드린 이유는 안 그래도 지금 이스라엘에 살고 있는 유대인들도 그 영토 문제로 팔레스타인 사람들하고 뭐 티격태격하고 이런 분쟁과 갈등이 있는 그런 상황인데 전 세계에서 살고 있는 그 유대인들이 이스라엘로 알리야를 하게 되면 아무래도 땅과 어떤 공간, 영토가 좀 더 필요하지 않겠습니까? 이게 과연 이스라엘 정부 입장에서 감당이 잘 될 수 있겠는가 이런 궁금증이 또 들고요. 그것뿐만 아니라 그 사람들이 이스라엘로 알리야해서 잘 적응하고 정착할 수 있도록 하려면 나름대로 또 지원도 많이 해줘야 되고 그에 따라서 예산이 또 많이 들 것 같은데 어떻습니까? 그런 면에서 이스라엘 정부나 주시 에이전시가 잘 대비를 하고 있는 편입니까?
There is no issue of no place. We will accept and absorb as many Jews as want to come to Israel. We will find a place. This has never been an issue or a barrier whatsoever. With regard to the effort of absorption, you're asking the right question. Some people mistake to think that, we finish our work by convincing a person to come or rescuing them to come and they land in Ben Gurion and kiss the land and then they go off their way. Well, no. Everything only begins then. And so I think it's not only a responsibility, I would say it's even a moral duty. When we encourage those people or help those people make the most difficult decision of their life to move their life to Israel. So it's our responsibility to make sure that they are provided with all the tools and all the skills and all the abilities to make their integration as successful as possible. This is a long-term task. This is not an easy task. This is a task where I think, we've made mistakes in the past. I think we're learning as Israel grows and becomes older. And this is definitely a huge national effort where at any given moment, us and the government are holding the hands of the Olim, where our responsibility is more deeper until they come to Israel and in their initial period in Israel. And then the government takes more responsibility as leading the efforts. I should say that for some special, unique Olim populations, that initial absorption period is a more extended one and one that we provide more services, mostly for Olim who come from distressed situations. So examples would be the Ethiopians. An Ole from Ethiopia would be provided with 2 years of an absorption center, which is full accommodation, full housing, full support in many, many aspects of acclimating to the Israeli life on behalf of the government and the Jewish agency. Because we know that we have to create a bridge for them because the gap of the culture and the life they had in Ethiopia versus Israel is so big. And so we don't want them to fall. We want them to successfully embark on their new life in Israel. As well as situation like crisis is now from Ukraine, where the government has provided an immediate 30 days hotel to anyone who fled out of Ukraine in that region, and then now is providing subsidy for the rent for the first year so that they could, more easily attain some temporary housing solution until they're able to find a permanent.
알리야하는 유대인들이 이스라엘에서 어떻게 잘 적응하고 잘 정착하고 있는 편입니까?
Part of what's easier for Olim who are coming now versus in previous years is that many of them have relatives in Israel who have made Aliyah earlier. And so they become family members. They become kind of their safety net, their mentoring network. They help them. Something in the manner of, it may be a beginning journey which is not easy, but there is hope. There is what to look for. You can really build successful life here. And so I think Olim today have those two areas which are very different than before.
이건 제가 그냥 개인적으로 궁금해서 여쭤보는 건데 어떤 유대인이 이스라엘로 알리야하기 위해서 나름대로 뭐 서류도 다 구비해서 이제 신청을 했는데 다 조건이 맞아요. 진짜 유대인도 맞고 이 사람이 이스라엘로 오는 데는 법적으로 큰 문제가 없는데 문제는 이 사람이 원래 살던 그 나라에서 무슨 예를 들어서 뭐 범죄를 저지르거나 사기를 쳐서 뭐 수배 중이거나 또는 뭐 교도소를 한번 갔다 온 전과자라든가 이런 사람도 알리야가 됩니까?
So I think one should understand a very clear division of roles between the government of Israel and between the Jewish Agency for Israel or any other NGO. And so the government of Israel, the Authority of Immigration, the Ministry of Interior, those are the only formal bodies and authorities who define what kind of criteria one has to comply in order to be able to become a citizen of the State of Israel. Sometimes it involves pieces about past criminal records. Sometimes it involves other criteria. But that's in the hand of the government. That's not in our hand. What we do, the Jewish Agency for Israel, is we are performing the actual work on the ground on behalf of that policy. So we're not able to influence the policy. We're able to carry it out.
주이시 에이전시의 CEO이신 아미라 아로노비즈 씨가 보시기에 결국은 언젠가는 전 세계에 있는 유대인들이 전부 다 하나도 빠짐없이 이스라엘로 알리야 할 것이라고 믿고 계십니까?
I think our dream is, of course, to make sure Israel is being seen as the homeland of all the Jews across the world, as well as the homeland for all nations and religion. And so we are welcoming, we're open, we will do utmost to bring every Jew from every corner of the world. We understand it may take time. There are Jews who make a decision for whatever reason to continue to live in their other communities. But then our moral responsibility is to make sure that they're able to live safely as Jews, that they're able to freely express their Judaism in whatever way, that they're able to grow their generation with a strong connection to their heritage and tradition, and that Israel will always serve as an inspiration and as a core piece of their identity. And as we say in Hebrew, if we're doing that well enough, dayenu, we will then see them over time making the decisions when it's right for them.
정말로 이스라엘을 축복하고 이스라엘을 사랑하고 또 이스라엘을 위해서 기도하는 분들이 이 브래드TV를 많이 시청하고 계시는데 우크라이나에서 온 유대인들 그리고 또 에티오피아에서 온 유대인들을 위해서 그리고 또 그런 일들을 이렇게 진행하고 있는 주이시 에이전시를 위해서 기도한다면 어떤 내용으로 어떻게 기도를 해드리는 게 좋겠습니까?
So I want to start by thanking you by already what you are doing. You're already providing a huge help and support to us. I know that BRADTV and Brad Ministries has already supported some of the Aliyah from Ukraine, and we are so grateful for that. I want to tell you and your audience that I've been on the ground in Poland, in Hungary, in Ukraine. I've held the hands of those refugees, many times single mothers with their kids, leaving their husbands behind, coming with nothing, so terrified and concerned, as well as elderly coming alone, leaving their children behind. And my ability as the leader of the organization to hold their hand and tell them everything would be okay, they've now come to a safe place and on their way to their new future in Israel, is only based on the support that we get from BRADTV, from Christian Friends of Korea, from global Christian friends as well as Jewish communities. And so I want you all to be very proud to know that the support is a very concrete one. We are literally saving lives together. But I think with regard to BRADTV, what I've heard about you before I came, but also what I've seen here, even in the very short tour you've given me, is I understand that your role is much bigger than that. I think the fact that you are working to create the content, to bring the story, to bring the depth of understanding of both history, present, and future of Israel as the Holy Land and of the role of this unique partnership we have between Christian Koreans and Israel is of huge service to us. And I'm always saying that our work of aliyah and integration is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It takes time. It requires complex operations. And therefore, the kind of partnership and friends that we need are for the longer term. And so we wish and aspire that you would continue, along with, of course, hopefully supporting the actual operations on the ground, which does require resources. And so I'm getting out of this visit and interview here very much inspired by the great work that you are doing and looking forward to help you be able to do more of that so you could widen your huge influence already within Korea and globally with Korean Friends of Israel. And so how could we work together to make sure that is a long-lasting partnership?
이번에 한국을 처음 방문해서 여러 가지 바쁜 일정이셨을 텐데도 불구하고 그 와중에 또 이렇게 브래드TV까지 찾아와 주시고 좋은 이야기 해주셔서 고맙습니다. 오늘 귀한 시간 내주셔서 고맙습니다. 감사합니다.
Toda raba. Thank you. 감사합니다.